Alright, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Ovens Garage. Today's video we're going to be installing some headers on my wife's 2003 BMW X5. It's got the M54 engine in it, and we're going to be putting on some Dynovox headers. Alright, so Dynovox sent us over some headers for this M54 engine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unbox this, show you all what's included inside the box, and then we'll get to work on the car, take off the old exhaust manifold, and then install these new headers. Alright, so we'll take a look and see what's inside the box. We've also got some gaskets in here. I have some different gaskets actually that I purchased because I'm not a huge fan of these paper style gaskets. So I got these steel gaskets instead that are intended for E56 car. So these steel gaskets, same dimensions, they'll work a little bit better because they're steel. And I'll just end up using the paper at the bottom. You can see they're pretty shiny stainless steel here. They come with plugs for all the O2 sensor bungs, and you can see what the standoff is on the rear ones. The standoff on the rear ones is intended to be a bit bigger like that, so that way you don't throw a light after you install the, these are supposed to be the post-cat sensors. So they come with plugs. You can see the welds on them are pretty decent quality, just right up at the top. And then you can also see down here at the collectors and around the bungs. Welds overall are pretty decent quality, so I'm impressed with that. Here's the rear one. That's what the mating surface looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and compare them to the stock exhaust manifolds when I have those off, and I just want to compare and see what the kind of the clocking orientation is on the exhaust flange, because that's my biggest concern, is getting it to line up. If you're interested in saving a bit of money when ordering your exhaust parts from Dynovox, you can either use the link in the description box below or use the code OvensGarage when you're checking out from the website at Dynovox, and you can get 15% off. All right, so here's a quick comparison between the old exhaust manifold and the new header. Here's a comparison of the old and the new longer ones, so the front ones. You can see at the bottom here how the clocking of the flanges are significantly different. So these are definitely going to need to get cut and re-welded to the correct position. So a little bit unfortunate for the fitment. I think these are more intended, M54 headers are more intended for like E46s instead of E53s. All right, so I've installed all the O2 sensors pre and post cat. I ended up just putting a little bit of anti-seize on the threads, and that's all. They don't need any sort of sealant. So I have these in the rough position, and you can see the O2 sensors, those ones might be tight to each other, and then the fitment on this long guy might be close to touching on this header. The next thing I'm gonna do is take this secondary air pump valve off, and then take this hose off as well. I am going to be deleting the secondary air pump after I get the headers on, but I'll make that a separate video. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is drop the back half of the exhaust. So 3 hangers. We got one on the right side, left side of the muffler, just ahead of the muffler on the passenger side, and then this bracket over here that attaches to the transfer case, and then those 4 nuts that attach to the down pipe of the exhaust manifold. All right, so I've got the exhaust dropped, and it's just hanging down. All right, and the last thing I've done from the top side is disconnect the front and the rear O2 sensors, and I've labeled them with some tape, the harnesses themselves, the front and rear, so I don't get them mixed up when I plug them back in on the new headers. All right, so I'm gonna start taking those nuts off the studs. When I took them off last time, the studs actually came with the nuts. They're all 11 millimeters. Here's a combination of the things I'm going to be using to take all of the nuts off. Because of the tight access, you'll have to use a wrench in some spots, and a ratcheting wrench is handy. Otherwise, just use your 1/4-inch drive socket with various extensions, deep and shallow, so that way you can kind of come from the top side. I'm gonna be coming from the top side for probably the whole front manifold, and then I'll probably go from the bottom and maybe even a little bit of the top side to get a couple of the top nuts for the rear manifold. The other thing I forgot to do was I just took this trim plate off and I disconnected the rear O2 sensors, labeled those, and then I just pulled them back from the bottom side. Here you can see I pulled those rear O2 sensor wires, and I've got
most of the front manifold nuts loose, and I'm about to pull it out. Okay, I'm ready to rip these old exhaust manifolds out of here. Got it, baby. Good job, buddy.
All right, so we've got the exhaust manifolds pulled off. It's a little bit of a pain to get them out, just because that sway bar was in the way. So what I ended up doing on the driver's side was removing this sway bar end link, just so I could shift the sway bar back or forward a little bit more. And then I finagled that one out first, and then the longer one out.
And I want to show you the fitment of these headers. So up at the top and kind of in through the tunnel here, it all fits fine. It bolts to the cylinder head just fine. None of the O2 sensors hit the shields or each other, which is good. So the only issues that we're running into, and this is on an E53 car, so an X5, is the fitment where it meets the rest of the exhaust system. So this is what it looks like. I've got the rest of the exhaust on a jack and kind of up into its regular position, or at least as close to where it should be. So you can see here, it doesn't line up. The flanges themselves, you can see, are oriented incorrectly. I don't think I'm going to be able to modify the headers just because of the way that the angle is on the rest of the exhaust. So you can see how sharp of an angle the exhaust turns up. It's more so on this one. I wouldn't be able to make this guy match up very well without cutting and welding something to mate up with that. This one I might be able to make work out pretty well. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to order a couple 45s and some straight 2-inch tubing that's stainless, and we'll pull out the MIG welder and attempt welding with stainless wire.
All right, so I've got the headers reinstalled now. I installed them with both those gaskets in there. Just keep in mind on those gaskets there's a little tab, so to make sure that tab is facing outwards. So I have all the bolts fully tightened up on the front and the rear headers. I have the O2 sensors, wiring plugged in, and then I routed it up here. I zip tied it a bit down there and up there, and it's all cleanly back installed on the top side as well as the bottom side. The only thing now is I'm waiting on the parts to arrive for making the modifications to the mid pipe. All right, so I ended up cutting the stock exhaust just straight off here and here. I've got it all prepped, ready for when my pieces arrive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse the stock flanges, and then I'll sort of just work my way back with the 45s and the straights until I get to here. I'll tack everything in place, and then once I'm happy with the fitment, I'm going to drop the stock exhaust, weld it all around, seal it up tight, get the stock exhaust back in, and then I'll be able to bolt it up.
All right, so I spent the day here kind of mocking up the new exhaust and welding it in. I've never done stainless steel MIG welding before, but I had to get some stainless steel wire, and I just used the same gas. Like I said, it's not the prettiest, but as long as it doesn't have any exhaust leaks, it ought to do the trick. So I'll let this RTV cure here, and once it's cured, I'll fire it up, check for exhaust leaks, and if there's no exhaust leaks, then we are good to go. So here's one last look at the headers before I put the bottom tray back on. You can see right up onto the passenger side of the block, comes down to the flanges. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw that bottom plate back on that goes on the bottom of these X5s.